Imagine living in a place without electricity, feeling disconnected and left behind without any hope of improvement. In today's Stories of Hope, we will take you to a place in Brazil where a community found light, both in their homes and in their hearts. Stay with us as we share how this transformation changed everything for an entire community. Welcome to Stories of Hope. Today, we're talking about the power of light, both physical and spiritual, and how it can transform lives. According to recent data, around 9% of communities worldwide still live without electricity. Can we talk about something as simple as light can ignite such a big change?
Yeah, I think about when I was a kid, and I grew up in the Midwest, so we experienced tornadoes and all of the big thunderstorms, and I remember when we'd be in one of those big thunderstorms and we'd lose power. As a kid, it's exciting, right? Like, I remember immediately running around the house, grabbing all the flashlights, and then going into the living room, stacking pillows and making a fort, right?
Oh, wow.
So as a kid, losing electricity is fun, it's exciting. But it's also very serious.
Well, yeah, definitely. Especially when you're a kid, everything's fun. I think you can make everything fun, right?
Yeah.
But as an adult, you have other things that you need to worry about. For example, you don't have any electricity. The first thing you think about is, how is my food going to survive?
That's exactly what I thought of first. It was the fridge, right?
So I remember one thing that my mom always used to say: don't grab anything from the fridge unless you really need it, because we need to keep the food cool.
Yeah.
Make that cool. Yeah. So don't open the door, don't do anything. Around flashlights, I remember we had candles,
Right.
like growing up, exactly when that happened, where to go.
Yeah.
Nowadays, where do we go?
On our phones.
You just want to make sure that you have enough battery, because here's your flashlight nowadays. But in a lot of places, they don't even have this, so.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember growing up in my home country, Myanmar. We didn't have electricity 24/7.
Wow.
So it was rationed.
Yeah.
There were certain hours of the day that the government would allow us to have access to electricity. And so we had to adjust. We had to time ahead. We had to prepare ahead. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I started learning that, oh, wait, people have electricity 24/7 in other parts of the world. So it was a very foreign idea. This idea about refrigerator, we didn't really have that growing up, And as you pointed out earlier, people in the world still are in that situation where they don't have access to electricity 24/7.
Yeah.
Maybe you are watching and you may experience not having electricity at home or in a situation where that happened. We would love to hear your comments. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can write your comments. Tell us your story of when you lost electricity and what happened. So I also wanted to mention too, with losing the electricity, it's so interesting how we changed from being a kid to be, I don't know, I just realized that now when you said that, because when I was younger and we did lose electricity, it was a very exciting time. But I think it was exciting not just because it was something different, but everyone ended up spending really close time together, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
Everyone was under that fort.
Yeah, you're just together, you start talking, you start playing a game you never played for a really long time. So for me, I liked it because I had undivided time with my family. That's true.
Here's the disadvantage of not having light, though. I had an interesting experience. I was about 12 or 13, and I attended a church meeting with one of my cousins. And on our way back, it was already dark. It was in the evening. Yeah. So on our way back, we were riding our bicycle back home, and the road was just dark. There was no street lights.
Wow.
And so I ran into another person who was coming up the opposite direction with his bicycle, and we crashed in the dark.
Oh my
because we couldn't see anything. Yeah. And I couldn't even see his face. He couldn't really see my face. We just said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And we just went on our way. In those experiences, how I wished that we would have electricity, with street lights, so you could see clearly. So you could go any time of the day without any problem.
So basically, having light, a little bit of light, in that situation, right?
Makes a
It
difference.
could have transformed the whole city. Really, right? A
Right.
little bit
Yeah,
of light
just a
in
little
a
bit.
completely pitch dark area.
Right.
You can see. And you feel like you know what's happening. You feel hopeful. You feel less scared.
Exactly.
Right?
You feel safer.
Yes.
You feel safer. Well, sometimes when it's Russian or not Russian, or when you have a big storm that you know that you might lose electricity, you know, the first thing that you do, your instinct is have some candles handy just in case.
Wow.
And when I think about like in a spiritual matter, when I feel like I'm in the dark, you know there's a dark storm coming your way, you can always keep the candles handy and return to the Bible.
Yeah.
That can be our light.
Felipe, you remind me of that parable that Jesus shared in, I think, Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 of them had prepared extra oil in preparation for in the future. And those who were prepared for the coming of the bridegroom were ready to welcome. But those who were not prepared, they were left in darkness.
Yes.
Right?
Puya, please. Now this is the perfect time. You can tell us about that special light.
Amen. Thank you, Jitesh. I would love to share an amazing concept that Jesus shared with us. And dear friend, if you're watching today and listening to our conversation here and wondering, where do I find the practical application for my life today in terms of light and darkness? I don't really see the connection. Well, hang on, because we're going to look at the Bible and we're going to see that it's actually a matter of life and death, whether you have the light or not. When we look at the Bible, we see that Jesus described himself as the light of the world, bringing hope even to the darkest place. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Then in John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus speaks about bringing light not only to people's surroundings, but to their souls. So, in a sense, Jesus is not talking primarily about this physical light, electricity. He's talking about the spiritual light that we all need. So today we're going to talk about this concept of being able to see God in the spiritual sense and maybe also in the physical sense, and how God can guide us out of the spiritual darkness that we may find ourselves in into a life full of hope and purpose. Now, imagine living in a world of darkness. Not just physical darkness, but spiritual darkness as well, meaning in a place where we cannot know anything about God or wondering, who is God really like? You know, I've often wondered about this. If we don't know who God is like, we would be very careful every day trying to figure out if today is a good day to approach God. Does God really have a good day and a bad day? Well, the good news is that God has revealed himself to us, so we don't have to guess who he is like. In John chapter 9, we can read about a man who was born blind. His entire life had been spent in darkness, unable to see the world around him. And then when Jesus came, this man wanted to find healing, so he was brought to Jesus. And of course, as always, Jesus never turned anyone around. Instead, he welcomed this person and didn't just restore his physical sight, but Jesus even opened the man's heart to a whole new understanding of life, offering this man a spiritual light. That's what it means when Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And that light changes everything, because the moment you see God, the moment you understand who God truly is like, it changes everything. We'll explore together how this unfolded later in our program. If our message today has touched your heart, or if the message that we'll be hearing today in this episode touched your heart, and you're wondering how you can explore more about the light of God, the way God has revealed himself to us in the Bible, I want to invite you to visit us at hope.study. Thanks to the generosity of supporters like you, Hope.study offers free Bible study courses on a variety of topics that can help you find light for your spiritual path. Just as light transformed lives in the story we've just shared, you too can find light and hope in God's Word. According to The Bible, the Word of God, is like a light to our path and a lamp for our spiritual journey. So visit us today once again at hope.study and begin your own journey of finding light for your path, finding Jesus, the light of the world.
As we've seen today, physical and/or spiritual light can transform lives in powerful ways. There's more to come, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We've just reflected on how faith can transform even the most challenging situations. And now we're going to dive into a powerful story from Brazil. Felipe, please transport us, take us. What's next?
Yeah. Well, Jitesh, we're about to see an incredible story of how faith and electricity sparked a transformation in a rural community of Ramal dos Esquecidos, or the Trail of the Forgotten. The small settlement was left without electricity for years, overlooked even by the government's Light Up for All program. But when power finally reached them, it wasn't just the light bulbs that turned on. Hope was also ignited in the community. Let's take a closer look of how once this forgotten community was forever changed by faith in the arrival of light.
The name Ramal dos Esquecidos is not the official name of the branch. It became known as Ramal dos Esquecidos because when Eletrobras in the Luz para Todos program came to install electricity in the canoas, settlement, they installed it on all the branches and left the Urubui branch behind. They didn't install light. When the power arrived on the branch, I then had the idea of creating a small group inside the branch because now there was light. That's when the idea of creating a Mother's Day program was born. And in this program, I visited 2 other branches that are close to ours, and we then started to invite the women, and they came. In this program, talking to them, I discovered that they watch Novo Tempo. And then we started visiting these families and discovered that there were people who had already done Bible studies and were ready to be baptized.
Bible studies actually began with Novo Tempo. They were already watching Novo Tempo's programs when we started contacting them. They talked a lot about the programs they watched on Novo Tempo, and we became more familiar as people, as brothers. In fact, when we were already well advanced with these visits, we came to the conclusion through talking to people that we should have a fixed place for our meeting. So we started talking about where this location would be that could facilitate the arrival of all the people who live in the area. So we decided to build a small wooden chapel in the middle of the branch where everyone would have access without anyone having to walk too far. Novo Tempo brought a very broad light which people here did not yet know, which organized their lives in all aspects, in their properties, in the way they work, in the way they eat, a different gospel which they did not yet know. So they became more and more interested. The feeling I have today is of seeing the miracle that God performed in the lives of these people through the signal of a TV, which is Novo Tempo. So this brought us a lot of joy. It brought us a lot of satisfaction, because here we don't just make disciples, we prepare disciples so that wherever they go, it's like a church arriving there. At that moment, they can carry on the work.
For the people, it was impossible to have light, but when the electricity arrived, Novo Tempo also arrived on a satellite dish. Everyone has one, everyone bought their TV, everyone turned on their satellite dish, and there it was. the Novo Tempo channel. Here for us, it was the channel of hope, the channel of love. The hope that arrived where there was no hope because it was the branch of the forgotten. Today, when we look, we see that it is the branch of hope.
You know, this moment of darkness here in the studio really makes us feel what it must have been like for the community of Ramal dos Esquecidos. For years, they lived in a physical darkness, but it was more than just the lack of electricity. But when the lights finally came on, both physically and spiritually, it was just like their homes were illuminated, their hearts were too, and their faith were reignited. And now we have the opportunity to speak with someone who's been at the heart of transformation that we've just learned about. Cecilia, who leads the incredible work in the Forgotten Trail. She has graciously shared this story with us. And Cecilia, can you tell us what the Trail of the Forgotten is exactly and how this project came about?
Yes, Felipe. So the Forgotten Branch was without power for 10 years. So it got this name, Branch of the Forgotten. And so we invited them because we had the desire to build a church, a small church, where we could meet more with the people closest to us, because the community church was 4 kilometers away from us. And it's hard to get there. And we wished there was a church near us, and we invited them to watch it our home, and they came and watched it every Saturday with us. Then, Felipe, we started the work, and from this work, we have already baptized 18 people.
That's incredible. Now, and for the viewer at home who's facing a difficult situation, what can you tell them?
I want to leave a message here, Felipe, for people who think they are old, that they have difficulty watching, visiting. Don't look at it that way. Even in difficult times, we can move forward with the mission of preaching the Gospels. So don't look at the difficulties, look at the blessings that will come. After you set out on the road, set your foot on the road and take that walk in search of people. Everything will work out. Believe in it.
Well, Cecilia, thank you so much for spending the time here with us. And thank you for the encouraging words too. But it's an incredible story, Jitesh. Yeah. Can you see like the difficulty that you have like in such an exclusive place? And something simple as light can bring so much hope for so many people.
And Cecilia is bringing the light.
Yes, literally.
Literally, right?
Yes.
In her area,
yes.
Which is beautiful, amazing to see. And like we said right earlier, a little bit of light,
yes,
in a very dark place, it shines and clears up everything.
Absolutely.
Brings
yes.
us hope.
Yes.
We'll be right back with more inspiring stories, so don't go anywhere.
Now we have some exciting news to share from Brazil about a life-changing initiative known as Anjos da Esperança, or Angels of Hope. This program is at the heart of how Novo Tempo, the Brazilian branch of Hope Channel, is able to continue broadcasting the message of Jesus. And spoiler alert, it's making an incredible impact. Let's take a look at how Angels of Hope is transforming lives through Hope Channel.
The best way for you to understand what Anjos da Esperança is to know that this project did not arise from a simple idea. Firstly, Novo Tempo was dreamed of by God. Later, this dream was shared with men and women who believed it was possible to transmit God's love and Jesus' teachings 24 hours a day through TV, radio, the internet, and Bible study magazines. But doing all this has a cost. Maintaining a television and radio network and printing and sending out magazines is not cheap today, or even less so in 2006, the year in which the Angels of Hope project was created.
It is only through the grace of God and the Angels of Hope that millions of people from Brazil and abroad have had the opportunity to learn about the teachings of Jesus through Novo Tempo. Be an angel. Be Novo Tempo.
It is amazing to see how God is working through Anjos de Esperanza to reach millions of people. This initiative isn't just about broadcasting, it's about changing lives. And all of this is made possible by those who support Angels of Hope. You too can become part of this mission by scanning the QR code on your screen or calling the number provided. Your donations ensure that the gospel continues to spread to those who need it most. And friends, stay tuned because we have more stories of hope from around the world.
We are really blessed to have Puya for a little longer with us today. Puya, I'm excited to have more of a conversation with you. And we're kind of picking up where we left off. And there's something, even before we get into the questions, I wanted to bring up. You mentioned, I was talking about electricity, right? When we didn't have it, it was exciting and different. And all of a sudden you made a comment. And it transported me into your world. And all I kept thinking was, wow, that's the context that I grew up in, right? But I never even thought from your perspective, you said you didn't even have electricity at certain times. Right? And you had to live your life accordingly. And I had to bring that up because to me, that's like, wow, look at the difference of how you were raised and grown up in the area you were in, the challenges. And that ties so perfectly with our story, right? From today. The challenges that you face in your area, not having electricity, not having light.
Right. I mean, there are so many problems you run into or challenges that you would run into when you don't have light. You know, you can only work during the day and then as soon as it gets dark, you can't do anything much. And so light definitely is very crucial for people to thrive, you know.
So for me too, I want to mention, because even again, coming back to it, but I felt almost privileged, but that's such I felt like I took it for granted. You know?
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting, because we have been blessed by electricity. I mean, use it,
you know, freely, like as if,
it wasn't long ago, you know, if we look at the history of the earth, the planet, and for most of the history of the world, people didn't have this 24/7 electricity.
Wow.
It's only in recent history that electricity was, you know, invented, discovered rather, and made it, you know, experts and really skillful people like Thomas Edison, making it readily available for us to be able to use it any time of the day. It is really a blessing.
And even then, even when it became accessible to everyone, still to this day, just like the story we heard, there's still the challenges with how much electricity you have, or even going. I heard a story from a friend explaining 4 years without electricity living.
In fact, even in developed countries, countries that we would consider as developed or developing, if there are political problems that the country is going through, if there is a party or a political person in charge of the government, they can often turn off the electricity.
Wow.
And still, you know, causing people, even in today's age.
Yes. So it's important then with all these challenges, right? That's a question I wanted to ask you. So Cecilia's incredible story, right? Explaining about all the challenges she went through. What's the biggest challenge communities like hers face when it comes to living in such isolated areas?
That's such a great question, Jitesh. And I've traveled quite a bit to different parts of the world doing ministry and services. And I've noticed that the challenges that people face in isolated locations differ from one place to another. But the most common challenges would be easy access to, you know, water, easy access to food, easy access to transportation, easy access to electricity. All of this play a major role in terms of how they live their lives. Those would be the most basic common needs that people have.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I also wanted to say, from your experience in other countries, which you just mentioned, right?
Right.
How can faith thrive in those remote areas to where access to these resources is so
Right.
limited? I know
Right.
that's a tough question, but how can faith thrive?
Actually, this is what I find so fascinating, Jitesh, because as I travel around the world, thinking that, oh, in this part of the world, they don't have this that we have here in the West, or they don't have this. But guess what? God is already there.
Wow.
I would find myself, God already moving
Wow.
in the hearts of the people. And so in many parts of the world where they are not able to have a lot of resources or blessings that we enjoy here, that we take for
We
granted,
take for granted.
we should not assume that they're not able to access faith. Faith is readily available to anyone willing to open their hearts to God.
Yes.
So as long as the person is seeking, as long as the person is wanting to hear about God, God will do something. God will send someone, or maybe a television, or an internet connection somehow, in some ways, for people to be able to have a way to learn more about God and grow in their faith.
Wow. Cecilia has inspired me, Puya. You know how?
Right. How?
I want to go home and turn off all the lights and turn off all the electricity. Truly. You know why? Because I'm more inspired to see how faith moved I felt like it moved even more in that situation. Than when I have all these things, and I'm complaining here and saying something, and I said, wow, look at faith moving, the light that Cecilia created, having nothing, that everything turning off, and you're still finding it.
That is so true. In fact, I think one could argue that when you have a lot of gadgets and technology and electricity surrounding you, you have a lot of distractions, right? So many times when you don't have a lot of these distractions, it's easier to focus on God, to focus on what's most important.
Yes. Puya, thank you for spending, we can keep talking. We love, this is a great conversation. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we've seen, it's not just about the physical light that reached this community. It's the spiritual light that transformed their lives through faith. It makes me think about all the places around the world, and perhaps even our own hearts, that are still waiting for that light. As we close today, remember, no matter where you are or what you're going through, God's love has the power to bring light and transformation into your life. Thank you for joining us on Stories of Hope. Together, we're reaching the world, transforming people, one story at a time. See you next time.